The reunion. The air in my parents' house was thick with the scent of roasted turkey, rosemary, and the faintest hint of my mother's vanilla perfume, a smell that always brought me back to childhood, though the nostalgia was bittersweet now. The low hum of familiar voices filled the space, punctuated by bursts of laughter that never quite reached me where I stood, half hidden by the towering floral centerpiece on the buffet table. Every year, without fail, the entire Weston family gathered for this reunion, a tradition that had outlasted 2 of my uncle's marriages, a feud over Grandma's antique china, and at least 3 grudges that should have died decades ago. I swirled the deep red wine in my glass, watching the liquid cling to the sides before taking a slow sip. The taste was rich, expensive, probably something Jessica had brought, given how she'd made a show of presenting it to Dad earlier. Aged 10 years, just like a fine investment, she'd said with that polished smile of hers, while Dad clapped her on the back like she'd single-handedly cured world hunger. I exhaled through my nose, my gaze drifting over the room. My cousins were deep in some exaggerated story about a vacation in Bali. Aunt Carol was making passive-aggressive comments about my other aunt's potato salad, and Uncle Mark was holding court near the fireplace, his voice booming over everyone else's. And then there was me, the ghost at the feast. I'd learned long ago to stay on the outskirts of these gatherings. Being the quiet one meant I was often overlooked, until someone needed a punchline. "Still renting that tiny apartment, Alex?" The voice was smooth, dripping with faux concern. I didn't even need to turn to know it was Jessica, sidling up beside me in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. The scent of her perfume, something floral and aggressively expensive, filled the space between us. I took another deliberate sip of my wine before answering, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. The table nearest to us had quieted, ears perking up at the familiar game. Jessica had always been the golden child, valedictorian, married to a corporate lawyer, living in a gated community with a pool shaped like a goddamn seashell. And me? The perpetually struggling writer, the one who never quite figured it out, the family's favorite cautionary tale. I finally turned to face her, meeting her perfectly lined hazel eyes. "Yeah, about that." I set the glass down with a soft clink. "I bought the complex last year." Silence. For the first time in her life, Jessica Weston was speechless. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up, her lips parting slightly. "What?" I shrugged, keeping my voice casual, though my pulse was roaring in my ears. "You've all been paying me rent for months." The color drained from her face so fast it was almost comical. Across the room, Uncle Mark choked on his whiskey, coughing violently into his sleeve. Aunt Carol's fork clattered onto her plate with a sharp ping. Jessica's manicured fingers tightened around her champagne flute. "You're lying," she snapped, but her voice wavered just enough that I knew she wasn't sure. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone with deliberate slowness. I scrolled to the property management app, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward her. There, in neat black and white, was the list of tenants, including Jessica and Daniel Hartwell, Unit 302. Her husband's name, her address, her rent payments. The room erupted. "You've got to be kidding me!" Uncle Mark bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Aunt Carol gasped, clutching her pearls like I'd just announced I'd murdered someone. "Alex, how could you not tell us?" Jessica's breath came fast, her chest rising and falling under the delicate fabric of her dress. This is some kind of joke," she hissed, but her eyes flickered over the screen again, searching for a flaw, a way out. I pocketed my phone and picked up my wine again, taking a slow, savoring sip. "No joke," I said, meeting her gaze evenly. "Welcome to the family business." The look on her face, pure, unfiltered shock, was worth every silent Thanksgiving, every condescending pep talk, every time I'd been treated like an afterthought in my own family. And as the chaos swirled around me, I realized something. For the first time in my life, they were all looking at me. The backstory. No one had seen it coming. To them, I was still Alex the underachiever, the kid who barely scraped by in college, the one who took odd jobs instead of climbing some corporate ladder like the rest of the Weston dynasty. "Alex is figuring things out," Mom would say at family gatherings, her voice dripping with forced optimism. "Still writing those little stories?" Dad would ask, already turning away before I could answer. And Jessica? Jessica never missed a chance to remind me of my place. "At least I have a real career," she'd sneer last Thanksgiving when I mentioned I was working on a new project. You can't pay rent with daydreams, Alex. What they didn't know was that daydreams had paid my rent for the last 5 years. The secret I had been writing under a pen name, Elias Kane, a name that now sat comfortably on the New York Times bestseller list. My debut thriller, The Silent Tenant, had sold 500,000 copies in its first year. The sequel? Even bigger. But I never told them. Why? Because the moment I did, it would have become their success. Oh, Alex always had such an imagination. As if they'd ever encouraged it. We knew you had it in you. No, they didn't. You should write a book about the family. God, no. So I kept it to myself. Let them keep thinking I was barely scraping by. Let Jessica keep smirking when I mentioned my side projects. Then came the email. The Oak Ridge Apartments, the same complex where Jessica, Uncle Mark, and 6 other Westons lived, was up for sale. The aging building had been neglected for years, the landlord raising rents while ignoring leaky pipes and broken elevators. And I had the cash to buy it. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, yes, the same one Jessica loved to mock, staring at the offer sheet. This is petty, I thought. This is perfect, I answered myself. I closed the deal under an LLC, Weston Holdings, a little inside joke. The property manager never met me in person. Everything was handled through emails and a very discreet lawyer. The first time I saw my name on the deed, I laughed. Jessica's rent checks were now going to me. Uncle Mark's complaints about the AC, filed to me. The family's obliviousness was almost poetic. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about the years of being dismissed, the condescending smiles, the way they'd talk over me at dinners, like my voice didn't carry the same weight as theirs. I wasn't the failed writer. I was the ghost in their walls. And now? Now, they were all staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Jessica's mouth hung open. Uncle Mark's face turned an impressive shade of purple. And for the first time in my life, I was the one they couldn't look away from.
The silence that followed my revelation was so thick I could have cut it with a butter knife. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto me. Shock, disbelief, and in Jessica's case, outright fury. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her wine glass. You knew? Her voice was sharp enough to slice through steel. And you didn't say anything? I tilted my head, letting the question hang in the air for a beat. The old Alex, the one they were used to, would have stammered, backtracked, made himself small to avoid the confrontation. But that Alex was gone. Would you have believed me if I told you? I asked, my voice steady. Jessica's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. She didn't have an answer because we both knew the truth. She wouldn't have. None of them would have. Uncle Mark, ever the opportunist, was the first to break the tension with a booming laugh. He clapped a meaty hand on my shoulder, the same way he did every year when he wanted to remind me how much better his kids were doing. "Well, hey!" he bellowed, grinning like we were in on some grand joke together. "Family discount, right?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Cousin Lisa shot me a hopeful look. Aunt Carol leaned forward, her beady eyes gleaming with sudden interest. I let them stew in it for a second before answering. "Actually," I said, smiling pleasantly, "market rates are going up next month." The reaction was instant. "What?" Jessica shrieked. "You can't be serious!" Aunt Carol gasped. Uncle Mark's face darkened. "Now hold on a damn minute!" But I just shrugged, taking another sip of my wine. "It's business. Inflation, upkeep costs, you understand?" Jessica's face twisted into something ugly. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, cutting her off. My voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I'm the landlord." The room erupted. "You little shit," Uncle Mark snarled, jabbing a finger at me, "after everything this family's done for you." "Everything?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Like what, Mark? Like when you told everyone I'd never amount to anything because I didn't go into finance? Or when Jessica spent years making sure everyone knew I was barely scraping by?" Jessica's face flushed. "That's not—" "Or how about," I continued, my voice low, "when Mom and Dad lent you all that money for your down payment, but when I needed help with rent one time, it was tough luck, figure it out." Mom had the decency to look away. Dad cleared his throat, suddenly very interested in his plate. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier. Guilty. Jessica recovered first, her voice dripping with venom. "So what? This is your big revenge? You screw over your own family to prove some point? I shook my head. No, I didn't buy the place to screw you over. I bought it because it was a good investment. I paused, meeting her glare. But if you want to see it as revenge, well, I won't stop you. For the first time in my life, the Weston family had nothing to say to me. Jessica stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the hardwood. Uncle Mark muttered something about ungrateful brats before following. The rest of them scattered like roaches when the lights come on, some avoiding my gaze, others shooting me looks of betrayal. Only my youngest cousin, Emily, the one they all ignored because she was too quiet, just like me, lingered. She met my eyes and, for the first time ever, gave me a small, knowing smile. I winked back. Then I finished my wine and walked out, leaving the chaos behind me. The reunion ended early. Jessica's face had gone from shock to fury in seconds, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her clutch like she wanted to strangle it, or me. You knew! She hissed, her voice trembling. This whole time you let us laugh at you. You let us think. That I was still the family screw-up? I finished for her, my voice calm. Yeah, I did. Her husband Richard, always the mediator, placed a hand on her shoulder. Jess, maybe we should just... She shook him off. No, this is insane. You're telling me you've been collecting rent from us? From family? I shrugged. It's just business. Business? Her laugh was sharp, disbelieving. You're mocking us. Uncle Mark, red-faced and smelling faintly of bourbon, shoved his way into the conversation. Listen here, Alex. Family doesn't screw over family. You think just because you've got some money now you can pull this crap? I met his gaze evenly. Funny, you didn't seem too concerned about family when you were laughing at me 5 minutes ago. His mouth snapped shut. Around us, the room had gone eerily quiet. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were staring at me like I'd grown fangs. Aunt Carol, who had spent every reunion bragging about her daughter's medical school acceptance, suddenly found her wine glass fascinating. Jessica's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I didn't answer. That was all the confirmation she needed. With a sound halfway between a scoff and a snarl, she grabbed Richard's arm and stormed toward the door. We're leaving! Richard shot me an apologetic glance, one I didn't return. He'd laughed along with the rest of them. Uncle Mark wasn't far behind, muttering something about ungrateful kids as he snatched his coat off the rack. A few others followed, their exits hurried, their eyes avoiding mine. The ones who stayed? Suddenly, they were very interested in my life. Alex, sweetie, Aunt Linda cooed, sidling up to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know, I always said you were the clever one in the family. I arched a brow. Really? Because last year you said I was wasting my potential. Her smile faltered. Across the room, my cousin Derek, who had once jokingly offered to let me clean his pool for cash, cleared his throat. So, about the rent increase. You were kidding, right? I took a slow sip of my wine. Nope. His face fell. The cool evening air was a relief after the suffocating tension inside. I leaned against the porch railing, exhaling slowly. My hands were steady, but my pulse wasn't. This was supposed to feel better. I dreamed of this moment for years. The shock on their faces, the instant shift in power. And yeah, part of me had enjoyed it. But now there was just hollowness. My phone buzzed. Property manager. Tenant in 4B just put in a notice to vacate. Your sister, I think. A dry chuckle escaped me. Of course she was leaving. Jessica would rather burn money on a last-minute move than admit I had any power over her. I typed back, process it. Standard fees apply. Then I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Before I could second-guess myself, I added, and send her the contact info for the other units we own, in case she changes her mind. I wasn't cruel, just done being invisible. As I tucked my phone away, the front door creaked open. My mom stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Then quietly, she said, "You could have told me." I swallowed. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer. That hurt more than anything else. Some things were worth the wait. But as I walked to my car, alone, I wondered if this was really the victory I'd wanted. Because sure, they saw me now. but they still didn't know me.